What if the time you feel you're missing was never really the problem? What if the emptiness you feel inside isn't about years or chances, but about courage? Courage to admit you're tired of pretending everything's fine. Courage to stop hiding behind the roles you've been given and finally live with your face uncovered. Because there comes a moment, and it almost always arrives after 50, when the body keeps moving, but the soul has been standing still for a long time. And that's the point where many confuse silence with peace. But it's not peace, it's absence. It's that quiet feeling of being alive on the outside, but extinguished on the inside. You know what I'm talking about. It's the kind of emptiness that doesn't make a scene, doesn't show up on any test, but it weighs. It weighs on your shoulders. It weighs on the laughter that doesn't come. It weighs on mornings that start without purpose and nights that end without meaning. Maybe you've spent years believing you needed more time to take care of yourself, more time to change, more time to try something new. But it wasn't time you were lacking. It was space. Space within your life, within your own gaze. A space where you could choose yourself. And for that, what you needed, and maybe still need, isn't clocks in your favor, nor empty calendars. It's courage. Courage to say, I can't do this anymore. Courage to say, even though I'm scared, I'll go. Courage not to wait for the world to believe in you, so you can believe in yourself. Because there's an invisible line between continuing to live and starting to exist again. And crossing that line takes more than hope. It takes a decision. The decision not to waste what still beats inside you. The decision not just to be a memory, but to be a presence. And it doesn't matter if you're 53, 58, 61, or 70. It doesn't matter if they've tried to convince you that your time has passed. You're still here. And while you're here, it's still time. Not time to chase after what's been lost, but to use, with truth, the time that's still left to you. Because the life you deserve doesn't need more time. It needs more courage. Courage to be whole, even if it starts now, even if it starts from nothing. And that's what we're going to talk about. With truth, with care, with respect for what you've lived, and for the woman you can still become. Let's go together. There's a day when you wake up, and everything's still in its place. The same walls, the same plates in the rack, the same path to the bathroom. And yet, there's something that no longer fits. It's not sadness. It's not anger. It's something else. It's as if the body still obeys, but inside, something has gone quiet. What she felt wasn't sadness. It was the discomfort of still being alive inside. This discomfort doesn't scream. It weighs. It weighs when you sit on the couch and no longer find joy in resting. It weighs in the gaze that drifts out the window, as if searching, but not even knowing what for anymore. It weighs in the heart. That doesn't ache, but doesn't feel moved either. Because sometimes the body gets tired, but it's the soul that's crying out for change. And no one sees it, because on the outside, you do everything right. You still smile. You still get things done. You still organize. But inside, there's a mess no one notices. It's a hunger for something you can't even name. A thirst for yourself. And that's when life starts to shrink. Not because it's gotten smaller, but because you've grown. Grown inside. The difference between surviving and existing after 60. Surviving is waking up each day out of obligation. Existing is opening your eyes and feeling that there's still something of yours there. In the taste of coffee, in an old song, in the smell of your favorite clothes. But when life turns into nothing but repetition, it starts to leave, slowly, silently, but it begins to go, until the mirror stops showing who you are and starts reflecting only what's left. When the mirror no longer shows who you are, but who you stopped being. It's not vanity, it's absence. It's as if one day you got distracted, and the woman you were slipped away without warning. But the truth? She didn't leave. She's just waiting for a gesture, a sign, a sliver of courage to return, because she's still there. Even if forgotten, even if tired, even if silent, she's still there, and there's still time to hear her again, to let her breathe, to let her live. Change doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in the quiet of the bedroom, when no one's watching, and the heart decides it no longer wants to live in the same emptiness. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't make promises. She simply listened to a whisper inside her and followed it. She didn't have support. She had intuition, and that was enough to take the first step, because waiting for support is often waiting too long, and she had already waited so much. Waited for recognition, for time, for some sign that never came. But that day, she decided to wait no more. Starting from scratch seemed at first like a defeat, as if everything she had lived hadn't meant anything. But little by little she understood. Starting over doesn't erase the past. It gives new meaning to the next step. Starting from scratch doesn't mean losing everything. It means making space for something new. And that's how she traded fear for curiosity. It was no longer about winning. It was about discovering, about allowing herself to try something she might not even know how to do. But that made her feel alive again. At 62, she decided to trade the fear of failure for the curiosity of possibility. It was a quiet choice, but a firm one. And that firmness didn't come from certainty. It came from the hunger in her soul that had long been asking for more. And when the world doesn't listen, we learn to listen to ourselves. A simple gesture, a small practice at the start of the morning, maybe a walk, maybe an old song she'd forgotten she loved, maybe the care of making her own coffee with more presence, the small daily habit that reignited her hope. And that habit became a ritual, and the ritual became strength, not to prove anything to anyone, but to remind herself every day that she could still choose, not by others' expectations, but for the woman who was being born again, quietly but whole. Some losses don't have funerals, and they don't hurt any less because of it. She didn't even know she was in mourning, because this grief had no name, no photo, no date. It was the grief of someone who spent a lifetime saying, "I'll come back later. Now's not the time. When the kids grow up. When I have more time." But time doesn't spare. Time demands. And when she finally looked within, she saw that there was something very old waiting for her, a desire that never died. It was just pushed to the back of the drawer, because time doesn't erase what the heart still desires. She lived. She lived for her children, for her husband, for the house, for others, and for a while, that felt right. It felt like love. But deep inside, there was a part of her that didn't go with anyone, a part that was left behind, that didn't ask for much. It just wanted to exist a little more. The weight of having lived for others and the feeling of having lost herself along the way. It wasn't guilt, it was absence. And absence can also make you ill. But she understood that she didn't need to erase what she had lived, nor rewrite her story. She just needed to embrace it, with truth, with affection, with a more generous gaze towards that woman who, even wounded, survived. How she made peace with the past without needing to rewrite it. And that's how a gesture was born, a ritual of her own, a symbol of reconciliation. Maybe it was writing a letter and keeping it. Maybe lighting a candle for everything she never lived. Maybe just sitting in front of the mirror and saying, "I'm still here." A symbolic exercise that helped her recover her identity. Because even what didn't happen is still part of who we are. And honoring your own dreams, even if late, even if only partially, is a way of resurrecting parts of yourself that never died. They were just sleeping, waiting for a little courage to wake up. Not every new beginning is beautiful. Not every morning brings hope. There were days when she almost turned back, not because she didn't want it anymore, but because she didn't know how to keep going. When everything is still so raw, the soul feels exposed. Every word wounds. Every silence hurts. And even what once seemed simple now requires too much strength. But she kept going, not with firmness, but with memory. It wasn't strength. It was the memory of who she wanted to become. That memory didn't come in perfect phrases, nor in grand inspirations. It came through small voids, in the forgotten coffee cup, left in the sink, in an old note found among papers, in the dress she hadn't worn for years. She saw signs where no one else would see anything, because only those who feel the abyss inside know the value of a detail that calls you back. And the routine, which once felt like punishment, became a tool. Routine can sabotage the dream, but it can also be an ally if you change your perspective. She began to put intention into what she did. It wasn't just ironing clothes, washing dishes, ticking off tasks. It was being there, present. And little by little, what was mechanical became ritual. She thought about the woman she was at 45, the one who stayed silent to please, who said yes so as not to cause trouble, who hid her own pain to keep others' peace. And she asked herself, tenderly, the advice she would have given her 45-year-old self. She would have said, don't wait so long. Don't silence yourself so much. Don't diminish yourself for anyone. And it was in this reconnection with her own story that she created new gestures. Small, almost imperceptible, but filled with meaning. How small gestures became rituals of emotional resistance. Maybe a longer shower, a song that made her dance alone, a walk without haste. A firm no. These gestures were like threads stitching her soul back together. Simple threads, but indestructible because they were hers. And that, for someone who almost gave up, is everything. It wasn't a grand achievement. There were no fireworks, no audience. It was simple. It happened one ordinary afternoon with the sun coming through the window as she set the table just for herself. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel lonely. She felt whole. It wasn't when she achieved something. It was when she felt joy in the simple things again. It was just a cup of tea, a beautiful plate, a tablecloth she had chosen herself. But there was a presence there that didn't come from outside. It came from within. After so long looking for answers in others, she understood. Some joys can't be explained. They're simply felt. And in that simplicity, she realized how much she had forgotten to choose for herself. The rediscovery of the pleasure of choosing for herself. Choosing what to wear, what to listen to, what to say, what not to accept anymore. Small things, but carrying immense power. Because for many years, she made choices to keep harming, but forgot her own voice. And now, with more maturity than fear, she was finally hearing that voice again. And with it came rhythm, a new timing, a different beat. Not slow, not rushed, just true. Why finding your own rhythm after 60 can be liberating. She began to reject the idea that she needed to keep up with the world. She didn't want to rush anymore. She wanted to feel. She wanted to live with more meaning than speed. And that's when she created a metaphor, an image she carried with her, like a silent prayer, something that reminded her every day of where she had arrived. The metaphor she still uses today to describe this new phase. Maybe she said, I'm like those flowers that bloom at the end of autumn. No one expects them, but even so, they bloom. And that's what she became, someone who didn't need applause to rediscover her own joy, because true life doesn't make noise. It pulses, quietly, but with truth. And once it's felt, there's no going back. Not all time past is time wasted. For a long time, she believed she had lost the best years of her life. She felt she had arrived too late for everything. To love again, to learn something new, to start taking care of herself. But what she didn't know is that time doesn't vanish. It transforms. And one day, looking around, she saw there was more than walls in need of renovation. There were parts of herself also asking for care, for color, for presence. The house she renovated wasn't just made of walls. It was made of identity. Every object she chose to place there, every plant, every change of position, was an act of belonging, not to the house, but to herself. She didn't want to keep living in what was left. She wanted to build from what she now felt. And in this rebuilding, she created a new routine, simple, affectionate, intentional. The new routine she created at 62 that made her fall in love with her own life. She started waking up earlier, not out of obligation, but because she discovered the joy of watching the day break. She created time just for herself. Spaces where time wasn't measured in tasks, but in presence. And without even trying, she began to inspire other women, not with speeches nor promises, but with her own presence. The quiet impact she has on the lives of other women her age. She became a mirror, not to show perfection, but to remind them that it's still possible. It's still possible to change. It's still possible to bloom. It's still possible to dream. And in understanding that, she made a choice, a deep choice, without fanfare, but with soul. the legacy she decided to leave, to live as a choice, not as a consequence, not to live out of fear, nor out of habit, nor for others, but to live because now, finally, she recognizes herself. And in that recognition, there's a strength that time can never erase. There was a time when she thought she'd arrived too late for her own dreams, for opportunities, for love. She looked around and saw younger people, faster, more adapted, and wondered, is it still possible? But now she understands. The time that passed wasn't wasted time. It was preparation time. Time wasn't wasted. It was preparing her. She wouldn't have the courage she has now if she hadn't gone through what she went through. She wouldn't know the difference between what matters and what merely weighs her down. She wouldn't have the deep gaze that now finds beauty where she once saw only obligation. Because what she found wasn't a new version of herself. It was the original. She didn't become someone else. She returned to who she's always been, without fear, without needing to hide behind roles that no longer represented her, without apologizing for taking up space, without lowering her eyes when she feels proud of herself. And the most beautiful part? She didn't defeat time. She conquered something else, something much subtler and much more cruel. At 62, she didn't defeat time. She overcame the inner silence that had kept her from trying. That voice that said, "It's too late now." That guilt that whispered, "You should have done this earlier." That fear of not being accepted, of failing, of being judged. She didn't eliminate those voices, but she learned not to be guided by them anymore. Today, she doesn't dream about what's to come. She lives what is, with presence, with truth, with a joy that doesn't need an explanation. Today, she doesn't dream of the future. She lives what once seemed impossible. And maybe that's the greatest victory, not over time, but over everything they tried to convince her not to be. Because when a woman decides she will live with courage, time, at last, starts working in her favor. You don't need more time. What your soul might be asking for is more courage. Courage to stop hiding behind routine. Courage to recognize that the emptiness you feel is not an exaggeration. It's a calling. Courage to step out of the roles that have served you up until now, but no longer represent you. Life isn't over, but the time for postponing, maybe it is. You're not broken. You're just tired of pretending to be invisible. And even if the world says it's over, that it's too late, that it's too hard, the quietest and most beautiful truth is this: there's still time. There's still time to be who you never had the courage to be. There's still time to say yes to what you've always secretly wanted. There's still time to start over, not out of desperation, but out of love. Love for yourself, love for what can still be lived. After 50, time stops being about urgency and starts being about choice. And you can choose with lightness, with intention, with truth. It's not about conquering everything. It's about not abandoning yourself anymore. It's not about the time that's passed. It's about the time that remains and what you decide to do with it. Life is still pulsing, maybe slower, but with more meaning. And if you have the courage to listen to that pulse, you'll discover there's still so much left to live. Because it's not too late. It's now. And now might be the truest beginning of your life.